Welcome to another episode of Pour and Tell. I'm your host, John the Cigar Surgeon. We're just having a little fun in the green room. I'm here with my host, as always, co-host June Lou. June, what's going on, brother?
Welcome to Sharing Our Pourings.
Sharing Our Pourings. That would have been a good name, hey?
You
Why didn't we do that?
I don't know.
Think of these things 10 episodes in. It's too late. Or 9 episodes in, as it were. Yeah. So this is the show, of course, where we talk about libations. No cigar talk, because there's plenty of shows to cover that. We're brought to you by Developing Palates. You can find us on YouTube, where all the good YouTube-ness is. And, of course, every podcast catcher out there, whether you're using iTunes, Apple, or Google, Android, whatever podcast catcher you're using. Speaking of podcast catchers, I just switched my podcast app because I got sick and tired of the badness that was my podcast app. So I'm not going to trash talk the one I had because, I don't want to be Mr. Negative. But I switched to Podcast Addict.
Podcast Addict.
Podcast Addict.
Are you a iPhone person or are you a Joy person?
Did you say I'm a Joy person?
Android person.
I enjoy happiness in my life, which is why I don't use an Apple device. No, that's rude. I am an Android person. Podcast Republic. Sorry to Podcast Republic. You should consider changing the way your icon looks because I can't read the name. Anyways, it's a great app. I'm an Android guy. I think I've always been an Android guy because I've always been a PC guy since 1885. Since 1981 or 80 or whatever, I've been a PC guy. Back when PCs weren't even really a thing. So I never really went the route of Apple, nice. And as a result, I don't really have any Apple devices in the house. What about you?
God loves you more.
I think so.
God loves you more as a result of that. He also loves me more as a result of that.
Nice. I'm all about that Chinese technology, son.
That's right.
All hail our new Chinese overlords. Just kidding. Freedom. Freedom. Anywho, we're here to talk about spirits because that's what our show is about. I want to kick it off here. I haven't been drinking a lot the last couple weeks. I've been super busy trying to catch up on work, trying to catch up on reviews. But when I pour one, I pour a good one. I had a friend over from Cigar Federation, Trippy Trent, for those who follow some of the other shows that are out there, like Sharing Our Pairings. Mm-hmm. You might have heard of that show. Somebody else founded it.
So Sharing Our Pairings.
Somebody else founded the show. I just kind of came along later. Yeah. For those who aren't aware of what I'm talking about, I'm being a little salty because there was a reference made in another podcast that did not immediately give me the praise of starting that show, inception of that show. But anyways, we'll move on. It's all good.
But the realists know.
Yeah, everyone really knows.
Originally was the curator.
But I love Trippy. Trippy's my boy. So he came all the way up to Calgary, and I'm like, well, I'm going to pour you every whiskey I have and every aged cigar I have, and you can have at her. Dude. So I poured Scotch Malt Whiskey Society bottling, which for those who aren't aware, there's a bunch of different societies out there. Like there's Springbank has a society, Laphroaig has a society, Lagavulin has a society. I'm not really a society guy. I just want to buy product, but they have these little clubs, and Scotch Malt Whiskey Society is one of the bigger ones because as part of the membership, they give you the exclusive right to taste and buy these one-off bottling. So essentially what they do is they go to a distillery, like let's just say Laphroaig, and they say, hey, we're going to buy this cask because it tastes really good, and it's going to be ours, and we're going to bottle it all just for the Malt Society people. And so what you end up getting is, because every Scotch whiskey out there is, in essence, a blend. I mean, blend has got a really bad connotation to it, but you don't make a bottle of whiskey from one cask. It's a recipe. It's like a recipe like cooking, right? So you take a little bit of this, and you take a little bit of that, and you take a little bit of this, and that's your Laphroaig quarter cask or your Laphroaig 8. So all that to say, what you end up with is a spirit that tastes a little bit, sometimes very much like the core distillery, and sometimes not, because it doesn't match kind of what they put out. So it's kind of fun. You get really interesting and unique whiskey that for me is rough because it really, goes to my whiskey acquisition disorder. Because if you don't buy it, you're never going to taste it again. Like once it's gone, it's gone. It's never coming back. It's a one-time unique product, and that I'm not a collector, but apparently I'm a collector.
Well, the FOMO kicks in, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of our this all of us deal with that like to enjoy a good libation.
So this is 132.6. The reason they have a numbering system is because it's not bottled at the distillery, and if you don't bottle at the distillery, by Scotch whiskey law, you can't put the name of the distillery on the bottle. So the way they get around that is with these cute codes, and of course, there's a website out there, you can look it up. I'm going to tell you because I don't work for them, and I can do whatever I want. It's our show. This is Kirizawa. Now, I think I'm pronouncing it right. Kirizawa.
It's Karuizawa.
Karuizawa? All right. Well, thank you for the clarification. I've been saying it wrong this entire time. So embarrassing. Hi. As you can tell, I do not speak Japanese at all. I know 1 to 10 from my years in judo. That's about it. I know how to say stop. I know how to say start. That's it. So for a little background before I get into the libation, because a lot of people out there will be like, okay, this is a great story. Where is it going? Karuizawa? So it's one of those funny things in Scotch. If you're not a Scotch head out there, I'll kind of explain. It's a closed distillery. They've been closed for a really long time. They've been closed since 2000, so 19 years. And they opened in 1957, I think it is. 1956. So you're thinking, okay, well, they're closed. What's the big deal? Well, they had an enormous amount of inventory when they closed because they just kept putting stock out. Now, one would argue, if this stuff is so good, why'd they go to business? And I kind of asked that question too, like all of these hipster nerds like me who are like, oh my God, I got to get my hand on this stuff. It's so awesome because it's impossible to get. They're not making it anymore. So this particular bottle that I bought is a 12-year-old. And Kirizawa was well known for aging in sherry, which not a lot of Japanese whiskey distilleries necessarily do. They often just use Mizunara, which is Japanese oak. And of course, sherry is expensive. On top of that, it's cask strength. So it's 63% ABV.
Damn.
Yeah, and they only did 553 bottles. I just to, punish myself, I looked up what the price of that bottle is if you're to buy it from a online supplier right now. The lowest price I could see was €1,900. I did not pay €1,900 for it. I would not pay €1,900 for it. I did have to enter a lottery to buy it. I was very happy to win it. I got it from my local bottle shop, my local Scotch Malt Society shop, which is Kensington Wine Market, which if you're coming to Calgary, you got to go to Kensington Wine Market. They have just a disturbingly good whiskey selection. Anyways, Kirizawa opened in 1956, owned by Mercian. I don't know how you'd pronounce that, like what the Japanese pronunciation of that would be. They used only Golden Promise barley, so that's kind of their thing, and sherry casks. So that was it, Golden Promise and sherry casks. So that makes them very unique, which is not a thing. You can either be.
By the way, I think it's just
Mercian.
I don't think it's
There's no hard C.
A Japanese saying.
Yeah, I have no idea who Mercian Corporation is. I've never heard of them.
Yeah, me neither. I'm all curious. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, they used wooden washbacks, which is interesting because a lot of washbacks are copper or steel. And then water from Mount Asama, which is an active volcano, which is kind of, it's got a cool tail to it. They used 4 small pot stills, and then you look at the distillery, it was kind of, it's at the base of a volcano, so it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and the warehouses are just covered in like this vegetation, like ivy and trees and stuff like that. It's very cool, but obviously it wasn't very successful economically. Regardless, all of that to say, it's fucking phenomenal whiskey. It's like some of the best whiskey I've ever had in my life, and I'm really glad to have it. Obviously, it's 63%, and having spent all of its life in a sherry butt, it's pretty big. And so,
do you taste much? Is there like much youthfulness tasted out of
No.
this? Like told. No, not at all.
No, it's got that sort of, I don't know if it's, you'd say typical, but that traditional Japanese approach where even being a massive sherry bomb, it's not a sherry bomb. I mean, it's both is a sherry bomb and not a
Balance.
sherry bomb, which is a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Japanese whiskeys in general does an amazing job of at any year level. Like I especially think about like Hakushi 12, Yamazaki 12. I mean, they're less complex than their older age brothers, but there are, I would say some of them are equally as
Yeah.
balanced than older vintages.
Yeah, I would say in a lot of cases, and I don't know how you feel about this, but in a lot of cases, I kind of find most Scotch at 12 years pretty undrinkable. Which I
Hmm.
know that sounds really snobby and rude, but
Especially at cast strength.
yeah. Oh,
I
at
mean,
cast strength,
right?
absolutely.
Like not even don't even. I mean, there's a reason why most 12-year-old scotches are watered
Yeah.
down. Like they're proofed down, right? Like because in my opinion, they kind of have to
Yeah.
be. So
Yeah, and you look at like Yamazaki, Hakushu, Hibiki, all at 12 years. Those could be dailies for me if I could get them on the regular,
mhm,
or if I drank
for
more
sure.
often.
Nowadays, people are snatching up like freaking
Yeah,
candy out there. So
yeah. I'm just glad that obviously I'm glad I got the bottle, but I'm also glad that it went to somebody who's gonna open it up and drink it and not resell it. I had absolutely no interest in sitting on this and reselling it.
by the way, I was going to ask you. So Scotch Whiskey Society, do they like kick people out of the group if you try to flip the
that's
bottles?
that's
I know some of the memberships out there do that.
That's a good
So
question. I should ask them the next time I'm at a tasting and say, hey, what's the deal? I'd imagine if they caught wind of it, they probably would.
you know,
In Canada,
kick out of the
yeah, in
group or
Canada,
something.
you can get into a lot of trouble because like the states, you really can't be flipping stuff unless you have like a license, right? And they
Yeah,
take that stuff pretty
of course.
seriously because
Yeah.
taxman got to get his money.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. How was your last
That's awesome.
couple weeks in libations?
Uh, I could probably talk more about like what I reviewed recently.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
you had a good one.
yeah. So I'll talk about something that's like really noteworthy. So there was a point in my life when I dove into rum quite a bit. Now it's more like just kind of go back and visit stuff that I've had. But there's a bottle of Eldorado 21-year-old that I really like. It's from I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Guyana. That's where it's from.
Was it Guyana? Guyana.
Guyana.
So you correct my
Guyana
Japanese, I'll
is
correct your North African or wherever Guyana. It's probably
South
South
African.
African.
It's a
Sorry.
country in South Africa. Actually didn't know about throughout these years until I was reviewing it and I was kind of looking through like the literature and specs of it. But anyways, South America, North Atlantic coast is where it is. So there's I really like Eldorado in general. Anything from their white rum to like mixed drinks with to the younger expression of the 12-year-old, 15-year-old, and then this 21-year-old is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
It's
I would think.
pricey for rum. It's about $110, which in the rum game, that's
That's a lot.
that's definitely top 10%, I would say. Um, but being from the whiskey world, I feel like if I could find a good spirit, an amazing spirit such as this, like to me, $110 is really not that bad at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is amazing. I mean, you guys will see. I don't know whenever we air. You'll see that this damn near scored a perfect 10 for me.
Holy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is how much I really enjoyed, and I could totally substantiate that because I've had a couple of bottles of stuff throughout the last like 6 7 years, and going back to it every so often, and I still feel amazed by it every time I drink it. It's got sweetness, got spice, minerality, earthiness, and all of those. And sometimes, like, you drink a rum that's this complex and yet this balanced, you kind of feel like you're not really drinking your typical rum out there, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like this rum even have like fortified wine notes and like sherry notes and all that stuff. So I highly recommend this rum. Well worth the price. It's going to be pretty hard to top this rum in terms of kind of the score and what it delivers. Aaron has some of this stuff. Our fellow developing palace member, and he was wowed by it. So he too was wowed by it. So have you had it by any chance?
No, I don't think I have, and I'm an
Uh,
equal opportunity spirit drinker, so it sounds like I need to get my hands, or at least get a sample of that.
Yeah, and the great thing is, in the currently, this stuff is available. It's a
Yeah,
shelfie, you know,
yeah.
like
No, nobody's given it a golden award or put it in a book yet, so you can still buy
yeah.
it.
So guys, go buy rum. There's a
What's it
lot
called
of
again?
good freaking rum. El Dorado.
El Dorado. That really sounds
Yeah,
familiar to me. I feel
I'm
like
sure
we
you've
might have
seen
it on
it.
the shelf up here because we have a
Oh,
lot
I'm
of
sure
rum.
you do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt if you don't. If you didn't have it. There's just there's so many good rums out there, and a lot of these rums you can find amazing rums for like, I don't know. I would probably say $40 to $50. You can find
Yep.
amazing stuff.
Yeah.
You
100%.
know, and that's amazing. Like and you could sip on it. You could equally enjoy it, just like any whiskey out there.
Yeah,
So
I agree. Now, there's lots of people out there that aren't really rum drinkers, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I am an equal opportunity, except for the gin. Except for the gin, I can do everything but the
yeah,
gin. So
and
yeah,
mezcal. I don't like mezcal.
yeah, I'm growing. It's growing on me.
Hmm.
It's growing on me. So, talking about libation news, we got a few. This comes to us by way of the ScotchWhiskey.com, the Scotch Whiskey magazine. Our good friends, I don't know, they are good friends. Jim Beam has become destruction construction on the Fred B. No Craft Distillery. They're calling it a small batch production facility, and they're investing about $60 million to reestablish James B. Beam Distilling Company. So,
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on that?
Um, that's good. Expansion means good thing, right?
Expansion means good things.
I mean, Jim Beam is such a huge producer of bourbon in general
Yeah.
in the States. So it's really neat to do a carve out of that, especially for Fred Noe. Um, I'm very curious as to what kind of cool things that they may do with it. So like they're mainly known for a lot of the Booker's bourbon out
Right.
there. So I'm very curious as to like what they will do, especially for like the bigger names as like Booker, and I think Knob
Yeah, I think Knob
Creek
Creek
is
is
part of
too.
that
Yeah.
umbrella too.
And I love Knob Creek.
Yeah, and the recently released, I think they're on batch 3 of Little Book. So Little Book has kind of seemed like they're kind of experiential sort of a line. So it's really cool, man. Like I hope they get to kind of mess with different grains, different raw ingredients, and different like aging methods, perhaps. Not aging method, but like more different like raw ingredients to age stuff
Yep.
in, to age bourbon in. This got to be a good thing. I mean, hopefully, this sounds like expansion wise that Suntory made a good decision on buying Bean.
Yeah, I'm all
So
for, if you want to put a bunch of money into a craft distillery and you're just doing craft batch. I mean, I don't see that as being a bad thing. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there would say there's enough bourbon on the market already, but as far as I'm concerned, you bring out more. Like if you can push
no,
the market and you can bring out more and new and interesting product, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, man, like I feel like personally, yes, there's a lot of bourbon out in the market, but they are vast majority of the brands and the faces uh, that you see on the shelves. They're all they're sourced, right? People they typically go to like Indiana, go to MGP, they select a barrel, and then they'll slap their own label on it, and they call it some story of like how their grandfather started the distillery or whatever
Yeah.
bullshit. But you know, but this is different. This is bean. This is their own distillate, right? So when I hear about stuff like this, I am all for it because this will push the actual production and hopefully boundaries of like good new bourbon that'll come
Yeah, I
out.
mean, I'm all for people getting away from bottom shelf bourbon and getting into top shelf bourbon. I'm 100%. Even if it means that bourbons are tougher and tougher to get, or price goes up because of supply. I'm happy the market's moving in a more up top shelf direction. I'm totally down with that. In
Yeah.
in other news, and I'm surprised I haven't heard about this before. This comes comes to us by way of the extract.co.uk, which is looks like a general news site. Anyways, Extract talks about a company that apparently has done this before, and what is that? They've launched a cannabis beer. That's right, cannabis beer. I guess you shouldn't be surprised. Everything's gonna have cannabis in it. You're gonna have cannabis food, cannabis whatever. This is by Green Times Brewing, and Green Times Brewing has partnered with Northern Monk in Leeds to launch a 7.2% IPA, which contains CBD, cannabis oil, which I'm not a cannabis expert, just so people know, CBD is not THC. It doesn't get you high. It doesn't make you hallucinate. It's not like smoking weed. It's actually more medicinal, really.
Yeah.
So
Like for general health purposes, I hear. I don't know exactly what it helps with. I don't know if there's uh scientific proof for that, but I keep reading like it's for like general health aid, whatever that
yeah,
means.
I'm not a surgeon per se. I'm just a cigar surgeon, but my understanding is that CBD has a wide range of health benefits, including treating inflammation. It has properties for people who are going through cancer treatments to help them eat. Treats migraines. So there's a lot of medicinal benefit. I'm just not sure the whole like putting it in food, putting it in beer. I don't know. It's not my thing, but it's a thing. And so for people out there who want to get their hands on it, they can. It's going to have 10 milligrams of CBD per pint. That doesn't really seem like a lot to me. This is apparently the second one they've done. They previously had another beer that they launched prior to this, and it did very well. So be on the lookout if that's your thing. Hey,
This gotta be a fad.
I don't think it's
Right?
going to
Like,
die out, man.
you don't
No,
think so?
I think it's going to be like energy drinks. I think it's like caffeine and everything.
Hmm.
I think you're going to see CBD and everything. Yep.
Yeah, but energy drinks, like it gives you energy,
It's
right?
so bad
This
for
stuff
you.
is, yeah, I know it's
It's
terrible for
terrible.
you. But I don't know, dude. I don't really know how to feel about cannabis and well, specifically CBD in beer, CBD in cigars. I know there's some of that going on, of course. I guess, I guess, the only thing I would like add is I hope they don't mess up the actual art of the actual product,
Yeah.
right? I hope it's still a good beer, right? I hope it's still a good cigar.
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of my words. I don't have a pro or negative thing to say about CBD infused
Yeah, I'm
stuff.
pretty neutral myself. So moving right along, and this comes to us by way of GearPatrol.com. Gear Patrol says that Jim Beam, so Jim Beam seems to be the flavor of the news, whether it's a fire, whether they're launching a craft distillery, or in this case, apparently they have it's called Freddy's Annual Little Book. I've never heard of Little
Hmm.
Book. You might be able to talk better to this,
Hmm.
but it launched in 2017, and they said that they're kind of it's a premier blended whiskey, and obviously blended whiskey has a lot of negative connotations to it. They say, and I quote, Nose Little Book is a blend of higher end booze. It's the new release is going to be called The Road Home, and it's an all Jim Beam bourbon blended of 9-year-old Knob Creek, 9-year-old Basil Hayden's, 11-year-old Booker's, and 12-year-old Baker's. I mean, that sounds pretty fucking good to me. Every whiskey is going to be blended at barrel proof and comes with an age statement that matches or exceeds the highest age statement they've seen for this brand.
Um,
Yeah.
hmm. I I'm for always for pushing the boundaries of whiskey, right? Whether it's blended whiskey, whether it's second, third, subsequent barrel maturations, I'm all for it. This is really unique because uh, you know I'm curious what the best of the different brands within Beam blended together will
Yeah.
taste like.
Have you had all those? Have you had Knob Creek, Basil Hayden's, Booker's, and Baker's?
Mhm. Yep, I've had all. Well, I haven't had those specific years'
Okay.
expressions. But because, like, for instance, Basil Hayden, I don't think Basil, I don't think some of the stuff is actually age stated on their bottle. So you can't really tell if you truly
Yeah.
had these. But I certainly have had all of these brands under Beam. But I think what might be really cool is, like, I've always I I I, I like to, like, do a lot of, like, dissecting and component
Hmm.
tasting, like, like, I really enjoy that within cigars, even though we really don't get to do that
Yeah.
very often. But I would be very interested as to actually taste each of these, each of these on its own by,
Hell
like,
yeah.
component style. Yeah, and then,
Call
like,
us.
being able to taste the final
Jim
product, you
Beam,
know?
give us a ring.
Yeah, right? Like, and I would love to do something like that. I think if distilleries ever decided to release it in that format, I think it would be wildly popular and wildly like educational as
Yeah, I
well.
mean, I'm down. If I could somehow get my dirty hands on a bottle of this, I would. I'd imagine it's going to be a little challenging, but whatever.
Mm,
I
yeah.
don't really care. Whatever. In what I could only be described as clickbait, because I've seen this headline a bunch of places. This comes to us by way of arstechnica.com. I've seen this headline all over, and they say artificial tongue detects counterfeit whiskey, which immediately makes you think of some electronic weird freak tongue being stuck into a
Hmm,
bottle of whiskey. It's not. It's really what's called an electronic tongue. That's what they call it. It's not really a tongue at all.
okay.
It's just a sensor. It's just a sensor that picks things up. But a sensor that picks things up isn't quite as exciting as calling it an artificial tongue. So, yeah. So essentially, this guy's designed this sensor that uses gold and aluminum, and they call it
Hmm,
a gold taste bud and then aluminum taste bud, and it reacts with the chemicals that are in a whiskey to determine whether these old bottles are counterfeit. And it is becoming this whole counterfeiting thing, I guess, is becoming a pretty significant issue because when you talk about old whiskey, and we're not talking like whiskey that's 40 years old, we're talking whiskey that's like 75 years or more. In some cases, it's really tough to track the I don't know what you'd call that, the heritage of that whiskey, track it through its lifespan, because in some cases the original distillery might have burned down or the records are lost or whatever. So it kind of makes the situation prime for fraud and counterfeiting. And I guess this is what they're using to counteract that. So kind of interesting.
what does it exactly measure?
So I guess what it does is it's going to measure the chemical compounds that are in that whiskey, and somehow they
Hmm,
haven't, of course, released the details, presumably to throw off counterfeiters. But I know that one of the things they used to do in wine was radiocarbon dating, because,
hmm,
and this is really, I don't know if you know about this. This is just me reading Wikipedia all the time. But one of the interesting things about radiocarbon dating is you can go. So let's say you've got an old bottle of wine before World War II. You can do radiocarbon dating based on the nuclear radiation that is contained in that bottle, because it's pre and post nuclear testing around the world.
hmm.
And there's radioactive isotopes that are in soil that are detectable, that are not present in older wines, that are present in newer wines. So if it's a counterfeit, it would have that. If it's not a counterfeit, it won't. And that's one of the ways they can detect counterfeiting in wine, which is kind of wacky.
Oh,
So today I learned. Um,
that's
yeah,
pretty
but I
neat.
mean, when you're talking like a friggin' 75, 80 plus year old bottle of whiskey, I mean, you're talking 50,000, 100,000, $200,000 for these bottles. So it kind of makes sense that the authenticity of this really needs to be checked, especially with some of the history of some of the scandals that have gone on in the collector's wine market. There's been some pretty high end scams that have taken place that have bilked people out of millions. So yeah, it's a
Hmm.
big. It's I don't think it's as big of a deal in the whiskey industry, because the whiskey industry is so much smaller than the wine industry. But you can see how that'd be a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even with, like, not even like super old expressions of whiskey, but even, like, I don't know, like the Pappy Van Winkle
Yep.
stuff, right? Like, people always go crazy over it, and um, And there's always talks about like, oh, make sure it's not fake, make sure the foil length is this
Right?
much, and the laser code is this, and it's etched here, and whatever else. Like, uh, very like from the perspective of like whiskey, I'm really interested to see like what you could do to test authenticity.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's um. I mean, you have to basically spit out like quantitative facts, right? So, like, how can you truly know other than like doing things like measuring alcohol content and proof and I don't know, color maybe? I don't know. I have
Yeah,
no idea.
I have no idea either, but it's
Yeah.
interesting, and hopefully they'll
Yeah,
be
no
able
doubt.
to do whatever they need to do to reduce counterfeiting around the world. But
Yeah. I'm
that
up for it.
that's all
Do
we
it.
got for this episode of Pour and Tell. When we come back in our next episode, episode 10, we're gonna have a lot to talk about. We'll be back from our trip to Colorado, having polluted
Mm.
ourselves with a substantial. Do you think a substantial amount of beer from Colorado? Substantial.
Substantial.
So
Substantial.
if you're not a fan of Colorado beer, you probably don't want to tune into episode 10 because I imagine all of it's going to be just Colorado beer talk and it's probably going to run a little long. So yeah, episode 10. But if you are,
And Colorado spirits as
oh,
well,
that's true.
because they're gonna have spirits pouring too.
That's a good point. So we're going to have a
Yeah.
lot to talk about on episode 10. And in the near future, we're going to have some guests on our show to talk libations. So that'll be fun. And we've got some future episodes just to get into the nitty gritty of beer production, whiskey production, some of the stuff we might have glossed over in the past, like glassware, that kind of thing. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure to check us out, like I said at the top of the hour, YouTube, podcast, whatever. Developing Palates. Check it out. We'll be back 2 weeks. Thanks for tuning in.